So it's been a while since I've been making videos. I am hard at work on several videos, many of them with a lot of progress on the scripts. One of them is in the final stages of writing. In the meantime, I thought I'd start a side series to get something going for you guys. I present to you the first episode of Movies That Don't Suck, Hyper Deluxe Edition. When I saw Nicolas Cage, I didn't even recognize him. I'm fond of a good crazy Nicolas Cage movie, but Nicolas Cage in makeup and a mask, it made him genuinely feel like a Manson-esque character. Completely took my thoughts of this is a Cage movie out of the picture when I saw him. He gets way into character. It was dark, the cinematography was impeccable, the score was perfect, and it just rocks you to your core. It's a fucked up story, I'll tell you that much, but it hits hard. That said, spoilers ahead for this review. Once the mystery was starting to get unraveled, I started getting vibes of Twin Peaks and PT. I think Longlegs and Satan were effectively a symbol of evil, like how Bob was a symbol of evil in Twin Peaks. The PT vibes were because it's all focused on fathers killing their families, pushed to do so by some strange spell. Furthermore, I think that the sound that plays when the coroner pulled out the metal sphere from the doll and put the ultrasound or whatever up to it, that symbolized something in the air, a very David Lynch move in my opinion. This was further hinted because the coroner mentions that he thought he was hearing his ex-wife's name over and over. It's symbolic of a hidden evil, something that happens in happy homes that are bright and shiny on the outside, but dark behind the closed doors. Additionally, I think the fact that she had to decipher a weird cryptic algorithm that turned out to be centered around 666 is further symbolizing the hidden nature of this evil. My thoughts on The Orb, having only watched it once in theaters so far, is that it represents something in the realm of childhood trauma and programming. Sometimes, the way people are raised leaves them with a darkness that clouds the truth of their past, making it hard to identify goals and find motivation for life. I'll speak to this subject more when I do a full review because I'm definitely wanting to talk about this movie more in detail, but want to keep my first impressions mostly intact. Before rounding up my thoughts on Longlegs, I wanted to share a theory that was posed by a member of my Discord community by the name of Zeroless, who is also a patron of mine. When they did the psychic test in the opening of the movie and she was shown an inverted triangle, she said the word father. It would seem to us that this is hinting that Longlegs was Harker's biological father, and her mom was seduced much earlier than we originally were led to believe. There's a lot I'm still digesting, but damn, that was an affecting movie. I was definitely taken aback when it turned out that her mom was the accomplice. I did not see that coming at all. I did, however, see Longlegs smashing his face on the table coming, though I wasn't expecting it to be so absolutely gruesome that his nose would fall off. It was pretty fucking metal. I need to watch it again to give a more well-rounded opinion or digested thesis, but I'd easily give it at least an 8 out of 10, if not a 9 out of 10. One of the best horror thrillers I've seen in quite a while, and one of Cage's top 10, if not top 5 roles in my opinion. This is definitely going to get a more thorough discussion in at least a couple of videos in the future, but I thought I should share my first and second impressions of Lost Highway. When I first watched Lost Highway, I watched it alone, late at night, and I was a bit under the influence. I didn't remember watching it at all after a short time. I just remembered trying to watch it and having a hard time because the library copy I was borrowing at the time was not working. Then, when I was watching it the second time, after I got this European Blu-ray collection of David Lynch's films, I thought I was watching it for the first time. Then, as I was watching it, I started remembering what was going to happen next, as though I had dreamed it. It was one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever had watching a movie, and I absolutely loved it. I now know why I didn't remember this movie very well from the first time. I didn't understand what the hell was happening starting around the 45-minute mark and decided to come back to it later because I was just so confused. I think knowing the context that it's directly inspired by the O.J. Simpson trial helps me get it more the second time around. The first time it was just so jarring with how non-chronological the storytelling was, not to mention the unreliable narrator. It was hard to keep up with the overarching plot because of it. It feels kind of like I got the intended experience by being so confused the first time around, though. For any Silent Hill 2 fans, I noticed quite a lot of borrowed storytelling and symbolism. Over the past few years, I've really taken to looking at the influences of the movies I've grown to love throughout my life. It helps give context to what inspired the things that I love, and it's kind of like getting the master codex for why things work in storytelling. I didn't put it together on my first run through the movie, but I see there's another rendition of the Jumping Man from Twin Peaks, but in Lost Highway the character's name is Steve V. With that thread though, he definitely has a different role in this versus Twin Peaks. In Silent Hill 2, I would say Steve V is kind of like Pyramid Head. But then again, it could be Mr. Eddie or Dick Laurent who bears that role. I'm more looking at Steve V because he seems to be a more subconscious representation of the darkness within the MC, where Mr. Eddie seems more like a subconscious representation of what he fears and simultaneously admires in other men. He has hyper-masculine ideologies, he's obsessed with sex, and he has several trust issues in others and himself. For anyone wanting to watch that hasn't, it's really important to pay attention to the names of the characters. Otherwise, it's easy to lose the plot. I think that's also a big part of why I couldn't piece it together the first time. I wasn't paying attention quite as closely. For my Kojima viewers who know how much he loves David Lynch, I think he took the most inspiration from this in MGSV with the storytelling of Venom. Kaz is kind of like Steve V when Venom kills Skullface, but overall Skullface has stronger Steve V vibes because he's such a creep. Not to mention the overall similarities in the base premise. Unreliable narrator, non-chronological storytelling, and a sudden realization of the memories he suppressed of things he did. Also a fun correlation of Steve V and V Has Come Too. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I can't recommend it enough for anyone who isn't familiar with David Lynch. Twin Peaks, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead, all of which I would say are great pieces to start getting into his work. I have a short guide on my thoughts on each movie and why they merit being someone's starting point on screen. Hopefully, if you're on the fence about it, this may convince you to take the plunge. I had been putting it off for years, but his work has absolutely changed my outlook on life and art. I can't recommend his work enough. I know he's not for everybody, but to those I say,
to fix their hearts or die.
Literally all I wrote about the movie Insomnia is that it felt like Christopher Nolan's version of Twin Peaks, and then I linked a Reddit post on r/Twin Peaks from u/J Dreisner, if that's even how it's pronounced, I have no fucking idea, that quoted Christopher Nolan talking about David Lynch. And here's what he said. Christopher: I think with Inception, I think the way I managed that was to keep dreams extremely grounded and make a big point of the fact that you don't know you're in a dream when you're dreaming it. Those kinds of things. And constantly remind and involve the audience in the mechanics of the technology that's using the dreams. The film rarely allows itself to become too metaphysical, too poetic, in the way that dreams often are in films. I think they're very tricky. As far as in real life, what are they, dreams? That's hard to answer, really. I think they're our way of processing our lives in a different way, looking at them from a different angle. I think they're a very healthy and necessary process. I also think, as I say, that films have a wonderful relationship with dreaming and with dreams, and they are a way of our connecting. We remember films very much the way we remember dreams. I had a very interesting experience many years ago. I watched David Lynch's Lost Highway. I had a peculiar experience. I think I was watching it on VHS at home. I did not connect with the film. I found it impenetrable. I found it boring. I almost didn't finish watching it because I was watching it on VHS. Put it to one side, whatever. I'd watched it on my own. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. Wasn't particularly interested to talk about it. Then about 2 weeks later, I found myself remembering Lost Highway as if I were remembering one of my own dreams. I realized that however he'd done it, Lynch had found a way. I'm trying to remember which way around it. It is like a tesseract is a projection of a hypercube, 3 dimensions. John: absolutely. Christopher: he found a way of unpeeling the way a dream works in our brain, feeding it to us as a narrative, so that it lives in your brain as a dream. I think it's one of the strongest examples of that connection between the way we process sights and sounds and motion pictures, and the way we feel about our own memories and dreams and those confusions. I have a big David Lynch video planned, so subscribe if you're interested in watching that. It's going to be fairly unique in my opinion, something that I haven't seen anyone else do on YouTube before, though maybe that's for lack of looking. That said, I really liked Insomnia. It was darker than season 1 of Twin Peaks, but not as dark as Fire Walk With Me or season 2 or 3. The main things that made it darker were how it handled the protagonist and his loose morals, as well as how it handled the antagonist and what happened at the end. I don't want to say much more than that. I would recommend it for any Twin Peaks fans just to give it a shot, if only to see the similarities and come to your own conclusions about it. Warning for this segment: I'm going to go a good amount into spoiler territory as I was absolutely moved by this film. I wrote this after my second viewing. The Whale was a cinematic masterpiece. I love how Bottleship movies can do so much with so little, and this is in my top 3 Bottleship movies of all time. It was tragically beautiful, which is one of my favorite feelings in art to have. I cried at the ending both times, but I started crying earlier and harder the second time. After having seen so many movies throughout my life, it takes a lot for a movie to make me cry every time, and I can see this one certainly being one of them. But I certainly didn't start the movie feeling this way. So the movie starts with a cold open of Brendan Fraser's character, Charlie, in the middle of rubbing one out, watching some gay porn. Hell of a start, immediately jarring the audience with a private, intimate moment. He ends up having a mini heart attack or stroke at the end, and then there's a knock at the door. It's a missionary coming to try and convert him into his fairly cultish denomination of Christianity. Instead of either sending him away or asking for help, all Charlie asks is for him to read an essay because he wants to hear it one more time before he dies, and he doesn't know when he's going to die. I really love the way that the opening makes you wonder about the essay that he's so obsessed with. I imagined that it was a college or high school thesis that he wrote about Moby Dick, but I wasn't paying too much attention to the wording in the essay at first. Then I started to hear the words he was saying once I got past him damn near dying while reading it, and I started to realize the immature but sincere language used in the essay he was reading. I didn't realize it wasn't his own writing until his daughter walked in out of the blue, and he was telling Ellie that he only asked his ex-wife Mary about her. It was a good curveball for those that may be unfamiliar with the premise of a gay man staying so far in the closet that they end up getting married and having kids, then having an existential crisis and abruptly leaving. It's not the most common thing, but it is known to happen, and it's tragic when it does. This movie does an incredible job of portraying what that damage is like. Once I realized that this essay wasn't his own, I realized that this wasn't a movie about a college professor who just wanted to hear what he thought was his best work in his minimalist life get read back to him, like I originally thought, based on his vague wording at the beginning. All he says to the kid when he asks why he wants it read, he says, it's a really good essay. It sounded like a man who was just fed up with himself and his lack of accomplishments, but wanted to hear at least one thing he made that he really liked read back to him. But really, he was a man filled with guilt and shame over a choice that will haunt him as we watch him live out his final days. Charlie had found love, and it wasn't with his wife. Before his world fell out from under him and he had to look at the mess, he was happy with his life. Then religion happened. I mean, it wasn't a sudden shock of Jesus. It was more of a sudden impact at the bottom of a bridge caused by years of emotional neglect from his family and self-torture over contradictions between his true self and his religion. He hated himself because he was gay, and he believed that he was an abomination. I don't even want to imagine what that pain would feel like. His estrangement through his daughter is made abundantly clear through the duration of the movie. Not just through the anecdotal examples, but with on-screen behavior on both sides. But what's incredible is that Charlie can see straight through Ellie's front because he read her essay from 8th grade. He knows that she's not evil, but a tortured soul that just wants to know that she's loved. Her own mom genuinely says that Ellie is evil, and it astonishes Charlie. Because he's able to see through this veil. Because he's able to cut through her defenses and show her compassion. He is able to prove his love in the last few moments of his life. The Whale is an important movie, and it will be remembered for being a masterpiece in my heart forever. One final note, the Moby Dick analogy goes hard in this movie. I'll almost certainly be making a Movies That Don't Suck video on The Whale in the future. When I first watched this, I thought it was pretty good overall. I was one of the many who watched the original in theaters, and I thought it was incredible and groundbreaking visually at the time. I still think it holds up in that regard, as I rewatched it before watching Way of Water. This much-delayed sequel starts off feeling like it's just a repeat of the first movie, but there are differences that keep the plot from feeling too redundant. The action was definitely more hardcore than in the first movie. Dude's arm gets cut off by a mooring cable being pulled by a large whale-like creature. There's a cool kill where an arrow that was stabbed into someone by hand gets fired through that person into another person. Overall, fairly creative action sequences. It didn't have the same impact as the first movie when it came out, but it had a decent impact on its own. The focus on family and being a refugee gave it a more gritty feeling, especially given the current circumstances of millions around the world. My main complaint with the storytelling is that the lead antagonist didn't really feel well-rounded, but that was my complaint in the first movie too. Before, he was just against them because he was an imperialist and he held a grudge because he was scratched by a Na'vi. This time, he's blindly out for revenge no matter the cost, and it doesn't feel like something an Earth company or government would put up with, especially with the high cost and low return of his failed warmongering. It leads into a sequel that looks like an all-out war, but I honestly don't know how the storytelling could be progressed in a way that makes it feel more unique. Still, I'd give it at least a 7 out of 10 for being well made and decently compelling. The combat was well done, and the character building for the protagonists was fairly strong. I'd give it an 8 if the villain was more three-dimensional. A note I wanted to add that I wrote early on in my watch-through. I noticed that the emblem looked a lot like a combination of the Outer Heaven logo, the Foxhound logo, and the Diamond Dogs logo all wrapped in one. You've got a diamond shape in the background, a skull, even though it's the profile, and a machete going up through the middle behind everything. Just an observation, but moving on. To say I was in for a wonderful surprise would be an understatement. I went in not knowing what to expect and coming out incredibly pleased with what ultimately was exactly the kind of film I know and love Guillermo del Toro for. It was meaningful, compelling, and the animation was magnificent. Being that my only understanding of Pinocchio came from Disney previously, I was kind of expecting a weird, druggy, donkey-based scene like in their bizarre rendition. I don't really remember much other than that, and their minimal circus segment, plus the belly of the whale. Speaking of the whale, that's the one thing I found incredibly fucking disturbing in the Guillermo del Toro version. I mean, why the fuck did it have those weirdly phallic and sphincter-like blowholes coming out of its sides? The movie's great, but wow, that was so disgusting and unnecessary. Legit my only note against the movie. That said, this was definitely one of Guillermo del Toro's finer works. The cartoony slapstick with Sebastian threw me off quite a bit at times and kind of took me out of the moment, but I still appreciated it for what it was. The story was so much more passionate and deep than I expected. The biblically accurate angels, forest sprites, but for real, they're fucking biblically accurate angels, were something to behold for sure. I really didn't expect that Geppetto would have a son going in, given I haven't seen the Disney version in forever and I haven't read the original, so I basically went in with no frame of reference. I also didn't expect how adult the themes would get. Geppetto giving up on life and getting pissed drunk every night mourning Carlo, the passing of World War I and World War II through the events of the story as a core point of the plot, Pinocchio being effectively enslaved by a circus ringleader, and Pinocchio being conscripted into making propaganda, Pinocchio being conscripted to fight a war. Thankfully, he fought against that because, of course, Guillermo del Toro hates war. It was incredible. I'll probably make a more thorough video on it at some point, but we'll see. Alright, we're going to go ahead and enter in the lightning round. This segment is going to be composed of my much shorter takes that I wrote at the time of watching these movies. The reason they're so short isn't so much because I didn't have much to say, but because either I didn't want to say too much, just wanting to encourage people to watch these movies without too much spoiler discussion, or because I want to watch them again and get a more well-rounded response written in the future. Talk to Me was an incredibly violent but emotionally impactful movie, and I would definitely recommend it to any horror film buffs who haven't watched it. There were a lot of themes at play that could be taken a number of different ways, but the primary themes I took away were revolving around social media and the repercussions it can have in your life, especially if you gain sudden stardom. There's more to it than that, but that was the biggest thing I took away from it, given that every time the hand was out, they made a focus that there had to be people recording. I was shocked that a Scorsese movie could qualify for a PG rating, yet contain themes of kidnapping, stalking, and reverse rape. Put in quotes because it's ridiculous to call it reverse when it's regardless of gender. It's really well done, but that PG rating was a misstep on the MPAA's part for sure. PG-13 would have fit better given the strong themes. If you haven't watched it, I can easily recommend it. It made a lot more sense why people were saying Joker basically stole the playbook, but even after watching King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, Joker stands on its own in spite of the obvious influences those films had on its plot. Wait, I wrote this earlier this year. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I still haven't watched Folie à Deux, but I've seen a lot of people straight up pissed off about it. I'm definitely curious about it, and I plan on watching it at some point just to get my own take on it. In spite of how angry some people are, I've seen a lot of people saying it's a lot more watchable than people's angry reactions would leave one to believe. Speaking of Mads Mikkelsen, Another Round was quite the film. I went into it fairly blind, only having seen the promotional images with the accolades from reviewers, and seeing Kojima recommend it. Big surprise given he worked with Mads, I know. It's a ridiculous premise for a movie that's executed very well in my opinion. The premise is that Mads' character wants to perform an experiment where he drinks before he starts his day, and he increases the amount to find the perfect amount of alcohol to have in a day. This is because he feels that he's more charismatic when he's had a little to drink, seeing it as a performance enhancer. He does this experiment with a group of friends, They take notes and compare notes, and it's quite a ride. It's problematic as all hell, but it plays out in ways that are funny, then very real, and pretty goddamn dark. The ending brings it all around pretty decently well, though. Bittersweet as it is. I would love to do a video talking about this at some point in the future, so I'll pick up the Blu-ray for it when I can. For now, all I can do is recommend it to you if you're looking for a unique experience in a movie revolving entirely around the premise of drinking. Fair warning, it is a Danish film, so you'll have to watch it subtitled or dubbed for other languages. Also fair warning, given the premise is problematic, if you're sensitive to drug or alcohol abuse in films, it may be best to skip this one. On New Year's Eve this year, I wrote about a few movies I watched last year that I thought were all kind of a toss-up for my favorite movie of last year. I watched the Mario Bros. Movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, John Wick Chapter 4, and Sisu. Out of all of those, it's kind of a hard pick. Mario Bros., against all odds, was a good movie. Spider-Man was actually better than I anticipated because the storytelling grew with the character and felt more focused this time around. And that's saying something because the first one was fucking great. John Wick is John Wick, say less. And Sisu was quite enjoyable as well, if culturally odd with the tonal choices, as was noted by Zeroless. So I'm going to read this segment. I slightly changed the text so that it would read better, but this is directly from Zeroless and his perspective, given that he has an understanding of the history of Finland and Germany and World War II and so on and so forth, because it's relevant to him. The movie doesn't tell you why the Nazis were in Finland to begin with. They didn't go to Finland as invaders, but as allies. Finland and Germany had been close for a long time. Germany helped Finland to gain independence during World War I, and come World War II, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, but they fucked it up. No quick victory. Of course, the Soviet Union's huge army attacking Finland cannot hold up forever, and they make peace. Finland has to give up land. Later, when Germany wants to attack the Soviet Union, they of course want Finland to be their ally, and Finland wants to attack the Soviet Union. Ultimately, the war turns against Germany, so Finland wants out and makes peace with the Soviet Union. Part of that peace, Finland has to drive Germany out of Finland, and this is the part where Sisu takes place. Back to the topic of which of these movies is my favorite. The kid in me wants to say either Mario Bros. Or Spider-Man, where the adult in me wants to say either John Wick or Sisu. Sisu also sticks out in my mind more, but that might be a combination of having watched it after John Wick, as well as series fatigue with John Wick. Honestly though,
Hey Universal! Fuck you so much for to claiming my video. Woohoo!
I think I'd have to give it to the Mario Bros. Movie simply for defying all of my expectations and pulling out a true piece of passion from everyone who worked on it. No, it's not perfect. It's definitely got elements of Hollywood trash going on here and there, but if you are familiar with the lore, the deep lore of Mario over the past 40 years, there's so much in that movie that you can't really argue that it wasn't made with passion from the people who worked on it. Illumination really outdid themselves. I didn't expect it to be that good. After wanting a Mario Bros. Movie that wasn't the original since I was a kid and seeing how the series evolved, I gave up on the notion of it ever really happening after seeing a stream of disappointing video game movies. Then, when the movie was announced and Chris Pratt was slated to be Mario, I was confounded, as most people were when they heard. But in spite of how it looked on paper, it all makes sense why it works when it's on the screen. It's not perfect. There were a few moments of minor groaning, but all around it was a solid movie. If I had seen it last year, I'm sure my favorite of 2023 would have been Oppenheimer, but I spent most of 2023 catching up on movies I've missed or rewatching movies I couldn't remember after 20 years. Edit. It's not a movie, but The Last of Us show is pretty top-notch too. I'll call it a draw between the game adaptations, because The Last of Us show had a lot of great moments that added on to the game's story. The main reason I'm giving it a draw is because The Last of Us show was basically just a shot-for-shot remake for half of the show, while the Mario Bros. Movie was unique enough all the way through to stand on its own. Still, the half that was original was very well done and moving on a different level than Mario could ever hope to. Now we're at 2024. Man, given all those movies I talked about in this video, it's really hard to pick from. If we're talking about movies that only came out this last year, that massively slims the list, but clearly this conversation isn't just about movies from last year. Another Round is from 2020. GDT's Pinocchio came out 2 years ago. Same as The Whale and Avatar: The Way of Water. Talk to Me and Oppenheimer were from last year, and all the rest are over 10 years old. All of which I saw for the first time this year, except Lost Highway, but as I stated earlier, I didn't remember any of the movie from my first viewing until I rewatched it. There's also others I didn't go into detail at all, like Deadpool and Wolverine was absolutely fantastic. The Dune movies are just phenomenal. Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Elephant Man, Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet. David Lynch has become my favorite director over the past few years, and I only picked up the Blu-rays earlier this year, finally getting to experience most of his repertoire outside of Twin Peaks. It'd be easy to just say his whole catalog was my favorite and not pick one, but here we are with the question. What is my favorite David Lynch film? If we're strictly talking about David Lynch films, I'd say my favorite is a tie between Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Eraserhead. If I had to pick one, I'd have to pick Blue Velvet. I mean, it's like proto-Twin Peaks, and Kyle MacLachlan kills it from the start. He doesn't have entirely the same energy, but they share the inquisitive nature of a detective. Of course, Laura Dern also does a great job, but she's not in nearly as much of the film as Kyle is. The extended and alternate sequences also paint a different picture that gives the viewer a lot to contemplate about Jeffrey Beaumont as a person and what his motivations are. There are a few weird scenes that got cut from the full film, but it wouldn't be a David Lynch film without that. If we're talking about movies just from 2024, it's gotta be Longlegs. Deadpool and Wolverine was great, and so was Dune Part 2. But Longlegs was such a fresh horror movie. There's been a kind of renaissance of horror over the past few years, and I've been absolutely loving it. Studios have been starting to steer away from run-of-the-mill horror stories, getting more interesting mysteries and ideas going on, because people don't want run-of-the-mill horror as much anymore. Creative storytelling goes a long way in making a great film, and horror is such a flexible medium where that can mean a million things and still work depending on the execution. If we're looking at the whole list of what I covered in this video, the question of what is my favorite movie becomes a lot more difficult. Talk to Me was also a really fresh horror experience. The Whale was such a deeply moving film. Another Round was surprisingly well-rounded for the premise. Blue Velvet, or really any of David Lynch films, could just as easily fill this spot. I think I'm gonna have to go with The Whale. I don't really have to say why, I already did. It was an absolute masterpiece in humanistic storytelling. After watching Requiem for a Dream and being repulsed last year, I didn't think that I'd like any films by Darren Aronofsky. I found Requiem for a Dream deeply impactful, but I never want to watch it again because it was just pure depression in a movie. But I love Brendan Fraser, and I heard so many great things about The Whale, and I wanted to see what it was about for myself. I'm glad I only saw the premise in advance, because it made the impact of the film just immense. If you can stomach the tragedies of this man's life, it's an experience worth having at least once. I watched a lot of great movies this year, and I'm looking forward to doing this again next year. I'm thinking I might do a similar series to this, where I cover what's in my personal collection of Blu-rays and DVDs, maybe do the same with what's in my Steam collection. I'm still going to make in-depth videos, of course, that's my bread and butter. I'm just finding that it's taking longer for some of these than I expected, and it's becoming more difficult to juggle what project to work on and just finish. The Donnie Darko video I've been working on for like 2 years now, and I still haven't gotten anywhere near finishing the script, but it's also already 10 pages long. Every time I go to work on it, I write about a page and then have to stop because it's just so depressing. I'll get through it, and you'll get to see it when it's ready, but it's a really hard script to write. I've also started several other scripts. Some I've scrapped, some I'm still working on. I'm very close to finishing the script for the first episode of a new series I'm working on. It's kind of a side series to Enter the Snaketrix, meant to cover more recent things happening in the world of Hideo Kojima, and what they may mean for his upcoming games. I'm guessing it'll probably take at least a couple of weeks to get this done after I post this, if not more, but we'll see. I've been working on it for the better part of 2 years at this point, so I'm hoping that it'll land decently well. Around the same time, I'm going to be re-uploading Enter the Snaketrix, Ground Zeroes, with some changes to the pacing at the intro and outro, as well as some notes here and there to add context for certain things. There should be an update video coming out fairly soon, to give some more context on why I've been gone so long, and what my plans for the future are more in depth and more accurately after evaluation of certain things. Until then,